Estamos aquí con Nick Cammillieri, director de la serie de HBO The Daily and the Dale, que narra la historia de una persona trans que en los años 70, en la complicada sociedad estadounidense, en la que estaba muy regida por los hombres y sobre todo un sector como el automovilístico, intentó hacerse paso con un coche revolucionario. So, hi Nick, first, I want to say congratulations for this great show, and it's a pleasure to talk with you.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, man.
So the story behind The Lady and the Dale is so interesting, but why did you decide to dig in and make it such an important part of your life?
I think so much of what surrounds me, I think is like really interesting and fascinating characters. And I thought Elizabeth Carmichael was really a once in a lifetime character. It was just absolutely amazing in like so many different ways. I think a couple different things being when I saw that Unsolved Mysteries episode, the one from 1989, I remember sitting up and being like, why has nobody done this? Why is everyone passing this story by? So when I saw it, I was completely riveted by her. And I think the other part of that being that for about a decade, I think I'd watched a lot of white male anti-heroes, and I saw Liz Carmichael as kind of the perfect anti-hero. I think the perfect answer to those, to people like Tony Soprano and Vic Mackey and Walter White. I mean, those three guys just took up one decade. So for me, I saw her as pretty much an incredible character. I thought, you know, she deserved her time, and she deserved a story about her.
I agree. We could talk about the day thing itself because it's so interesting as well. But I think that here the most interesting thing is to land in Liz Carmichael as a character, because at the end of the day, she's the real star of the show. So maybe it's my imagination, so if I'm wrong, you can correct me, but when you talk about her in the past, mostly in the first episode, when she was Dreary, you talk about her as the subject. Does this have like a special meaning? Like she wouldn't be her at all until she became a woman, or is just a narrative decision?
Yeah, sure. So I think so much of that first episode is like, thank you for watching it, by the way. I appreciate it. It really has a lot of meaning and a lot of purpose behind it, because it's somebody who was doing all these different petty crimes, or basically chose to make a career out of being a criminal, and then effectively came into her own and found this car that became the sole purpose and stability in her life. Like, that she was doing all this stuff, particularly because she hadn't fully found that identity and purpose. And that's a lot of what that first episode was, is saying that she had found that thing, that through all those years of doing sales jobs, that she had found the one thing that she was going to dive into completely and devote everything to. And I think Candy Michael makes that representation as well, that for the first time in their lives, they had stability. They actually had a life. And it was exactly what they had wanted. And so finding, you know, everyone takes their own pathway to get to where they do. But, you know, it was, in many ways, I think she was kind of an iconoclast. And so that's a lot of what the first episode deals with, is someone finding purpose, not only in their self-identity, but in how they choose, not only how they choose to pursue their life, but what it is that comes to symbolically represent them. And I do think the Dale card represents a lot of Elizabeth Carmichael.
So now I'm going to remind one of the characters of the show, Lee's brother-in-law, that said that having a trans person in his family made him normalize the fact and understand it. So I want to know that, do you think that the main problem in the discrimination cases to the collective is because this lack of knowledge?
Yeah, so I do thank you for calling that out. I do think there is a lack of knowledge. I read this stat that said that it's something like 80% of people had never met a trans person. I mean, I don't think I had ever knowingly met a trans person, and I wasn't really involved in the LGBT community when I started this project. A lot of this was really a crash course for me about understanding what that meant and how that life was lived. And it takes work. It takes real work to get yourself involved on that level, to understand what it takes to not only be a trans person, but to live as a trans person. Those are experiences that, unless you're up close and personal with it, I do think it creates a bias or a slant perspective and it's not maybe so much a conscious vindictive bias, but that but you don't fully understand that like not all lives are created equal, and that you have to understand certain things to understand how much of the world is gendered in ways that, or how much of the world is maybe discriminatory in ways that that began many decades ago, or that began a long time ago, that things are constructed a certain way that don't aid people who are particularly trans or in the LGBT community.
Do you think that Liz was a selfish person? I mean, she was saying all the time, like, she only wants to be millionaire, didn't want to change the world, or was she eaten by all the bubble that she created about the day?
So with the first part of that question, which is that I do think that she was selfish, and that speaks to her, but that's directly to her ideology and philosophy, which is that she was an objectivist. Yeah. And for those who don't know, objectivism is the belief that by being selfish, other people will incidentally, or as a nature or a byproduct of that selfishness, they will also gain from that as well. So with her being an objectivist, the case in point being Ayn Rand, because Ayn Rand is a huge objectivist. So she followed those teachings and she leaned into that, I think, also as well as like, not just but as an objectivist, yeah. So I do think that she was selfish.
Well, she was capitalist.
Capitalism is always the need to create a scarcity, create an economy of scarcity where you're always, if you can't exploit labor and you can't exploit people, particularly, you have to keep creating an environment of exploitation, of consumption and exploitation. And if you can't do that, then ultimately capitalism fails. Yeah.
So it's so interesting that you decide to use some cartoons to tell the story. Mm-hmm. For me, it's the right way to accompany this bizarre story. But was it just an artistic decision, or does it have like a deeper meaning?
We did have some live action reenactments planned, and then COVID happened, and we had to go completely remote. So a lot of our decision was to push to completely do animation, and it was really a group decision. It was a collaborative decision about like how to go about doing it. A lot of that decision was made to make it DIY, was to make it seem like it was built like the Dale car itself, and it was paper animations, all paper transitions. There's nothing digital. It was all done that way, to make it look like it's a world that Liz could have constructed herself, like it was her story, and the story can expand or shrink along with, it's her universe, it's her story. It's like she's telling it to you. So a lot of that stuff is made to look like it's as if it's her story. It's this idea that we can see kind of the cult of personality, someone who's creating, you can see her driving the car underwater, you're smashing into walls. It's meant to foster a world where you can either see how serious or how not serious that thing is, like that claim can be. So it's really an exploration kind of internally of Liz Carmichael.
Yeah, I think it's an awesome decision because it's a soft story to come, Like so many moments, so many characters. So the cartoon type is like going through that story. So good.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. Thank you.
Do you think that the Dale would have gotten ahead in the market if Liz were a man?
It's hard to say because my leaning comes down to experience. Right? It comes down to you ever heard the Peter principle, which is like people being promoted to beyond their level of competence. Like that to me, I think speaks out more than anything, is that like she was trying to do something in a few months that it takes Detroit years to do. So there was a lot of aggressive expansion. So I guess my answer kind of falls on an experience, I think, rather than the gender. I think that I think everything that happened afterwards, I think it would raise a different question and a different answer for me. But ultimately, I would side with less so. I think it comes down to experience and the lack of execution when it mattered.
I just think that it's an impossible project, to be honest.
Yeah. You're talking about the Dale Carr project was, I mean, you can call it, a suicide mission. You can call it
Yeah.
whatever you want. It was the most aggressive project possible. But then again, you come one test drive away from getting serious money that pushes you into it pushes you up into a higher level where you could circumvent the courts at that point. But it's a real question. There's a real small dividing line between, how much is crazy and how much isn't, because I immediately, my response is that you kind of have to be delusional to be an entrepreneur. You can't be sane. Like most businesses fail within 3 years. Like if you think about that your rate of success is not high. Most businesses fail within 3 years, the rest within 5. So you have to be obsessive. You have to be delusional. I mean, most people are not going to believe in the thing that you do. I mean, when I started this project, I mean, filmmakers are entrepreneurs. Like I would consider this, like when I started, nobody thought I could do it. Like people were saying to me, oh yeah, well, good luck to you. And okay, whatever. But it was like, at the end of the day, I had to do so many different things to be able to get this project to where it went to that, like, at the end of the day, I relate that to Liz, which is you're only as crazy as your idea and your execution. And she had rocket scientists working for her. So, you could say it's crazy or delusional, but I also look at it on the flip side, which is that, like, I don't know any other way you could be an entrepreneur.
I'm agree, and all that you said is again capitalism. I think this story is like a very good portrait of that.
Yeah, I mean, it really shows kind of the reaches or the extent, or maybe even possibly the fallacy of the American dream. that when you have it really shows you how the rich and the poor live. I mean, there's a lot of. I also think that that's one of the importances of episode 1 is that you see the places that Liz, when Liz is representing male, you can see the places that Liz is living and like how she was living and going from place to place. So when you see how poor Liz was throughout that entire time period, I do think that a lot of the decisions that she made were made not because she was rich, I think because she was poor. Like there were decisions that were made to cut corners and do things. And the question is like, how much of that is a class thing? How much of that is because you were in poverty for that many years? I mean, the poverty mindset, nobody ever talks about it, but I think it permeates her entire project. I think it permeates her entire life. The fact that later on you find out that she goes Christmas shopping on January 25th because all the sales are on Christmas. It's like, does that, that level of poverty continues to permeate throughout her life. And I think the Dale Carr is kind of the perfect example of how hard it is to mentally leave that place of poverty. I mean, there's a part where it got cut out, but there's a part in episode 2 that would have been in episode 2 where Liz says to John Griffiths, John, I'm getting $30,000 a day. What do I do with it? And it's like, so a person who hadn't had that much money in their lives suddenly coming into all this money for a project is like, it rings as someone who doesn't understand, who's been so poor, who doesn't understand like what it takes to get it there because of that class level. And I do think there's something to be said about that this series shows that there are 2 different classes. I think if you read between the lines, you can see that. At least that's something that stood out to me anyway.
Mm. You think about it, Liz Carmichael made like the all steps of the American dream, like reaching the high level no matter how. I mean, no matter my past, it doesn't matter if I treat people bad, if I exploit them. I'm here now. I'm going to take advantage of that.
Yeah, there's something to be said that she kind of is the litmus test for the American dream in a sense. I mean, she is everything that you say, regardless of your past. It doesn't matter what gender you are. Like, it doesn't matter your background. Like, you should be able to succeed no matter what through pure effort. I mean, if you think about it, I think about Elon Musk when I think about that, because Elon Musk was hours. I think he was 1 hour from bankruptcy in 2009, and he had no money. and Tesla was about to go bankrupt. And then he had to bluff his own corporate board to invest, I think, $50 million or $150 million, something like that, into the company to keep it alive. He was like, well, I'm going to invest, so you should. And then they were like, no, I'm going to do it. Like, if you think about that, it's like, there's no difference between Elon Musk in that moment and Elizabeth Carmichael in that test drive. There's almost no difference. The difference is that if that test drive succeeds, you know, we're potentially telling a different story here. If there's $30 million and, you know, suddenly you've got $30 million instead of, you know, 68,000 or whatever you had left, you know, like that's a completely different story. Because once you're at that level, you know, you're now competing with the big dogs at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And finally, Nick, I would like to know if you are working on any future projects and if you would like to work with HBO again.
Yeah, I mean, HBO is incredible. I mean, everything they did. I mean, you accepting and having a trans anti-hero or a trans iconoclast, like somebody who bucks the system in a lot of ways. You don't know like how people are going to take that, and the fact that not only did Duplass Brothers Productions but HBO go yes was like huge to me, because it was like you just don't know. You don't know like what the atmosphere is going to be like. You don't know what the terrain's going to be like. But everyone was wonderful to work with. Everyone understood that this was a really tough task, you know, to work with them. And they were super, super flexible and patient with us. I mean, it took about 1.5 years to make this.
Yeah.
So it was, you know, so their flexibility and their patience was really cool. And so it was really great to work with them. And then not only that, but like the feature stuff, I've got a feature script that I'm working on. So I'm pretty much done with documentaries. I was a screenwriter before the documentary, and I'm a screenwriter again. And so I'm a writer director now, and that's where I'm best, I think. So I'm going to be there, and I've got a feature script, but I don't think I can talk about it. But it basically involves soda pop and Nazis, and I think that's maybe the best description of it. But I've basically got 2 feature scripts, and that's where I'm at right now.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I mean,
so Nick, I wish you all the luck for the future with those scripts. And I'm going to talk a bit in Spanish. Recordamos que The Lady and the Dale está en HBO España desde el pasado mes de febrero y de verdad que la recomendamos fuertemente porque es una gran historia y seguro que os va a sorprender. Nick, it's been a pleasure.
Dude, thank you, man. Thank you for having me.
Congratulations again for that show. I think it's really cool and a story that you can think about it like for weeks, really.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. It truly means a lot. That it especially in a time where the life expectancy of any talking point is like a day now. You know, the fact that you're still thinking about it is pretty cool to me.
Thank you very much, Nick.
Thanks, Brad. I appreciate it, man.